Daniel Dorfman joins me here again today, and you can learn what he's up to by heading over to investwithroots.com. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. Daniel and his team have a very unique aspect to real estate investing. And to be honest with you, Daniel, even after a year, I've yet to run into anybody else doing this type of strategy. So, with that tease, we're going to dive right in and start things off with you giving a summary as to what your team and you actually do.
Thank you for having me back on. We're excited. Roots Investment Community is a place where anybody, accredited or non accredited, can participate in real estate investing for as little as $100. And we do that through a REIT format at our fund. One of the biggest things that we do that's different than anybody else is we give our residents the opportunity to be our partners and not our tenants, and to build wealth side by side with us as we continue to operate the asset and manage the fund.
Sure. So, can you break that down a little bit? How does that actually work? They sign a lease, and does part of that lease payment go towards an investment, or how does that actually work out?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, what we do is from day one, we have a program that every one of our residents is involved in, and it's called Living It Like You Own It. And what we want them to do is basically that we want them to live in our residencies and our properties like they own them. And the way the program works is pretty simple. So when you come to rent with us, you'll be given the opportunity if you want to. And instead of giving us a security deposit, just investing that value into the fund. And so from day one, a lot of our residents move in owning a small piece of the house they're moving into and a small piece of the entire portfolio overall. They get all the same benefits of any other investor from that day they moved in. And the important thing with that is, as a resident, and we're in workforce housing, you don't necessarily usually have this huge amount of available wealth or savings to go and invest anywhere. So by giving you this opportunity to invest what you already were going to be coming out of pocket for, it's not asking you for extra capital or for extra to save up more. It's just saying basically, hey, we recognize you as a partner and as a big proponent to why this real estate investment hopefully is going to work out really well. And so from day one, they have that opportunity to invest what would have been that security deposit value into the fund. And then what we want to do is through our program, excite them and entice them to be great renters. So quarterly from the day they move in, they're asked to, we'll check three things. So you move in 90 days later, we're going to check, do you have a balance? So basically, have you paid rent on time? Check. No balance. Awesome. That's check number one. We're going to see, have you been a good neighbor? So for us, that just means, are there any lease violations? That's check number two. And then check number three is probably one of the more unique things that we do. And it was developed because of my experience in the asset class and my frustration with not being able to do a lot of preventative maintenance at my properties that ended up being big gotcha moments at the end when they move out. At the end of the third month, we asked them to do a video walkthrough and survey of the property. And that's again to identify small leaks under sinks. It's to identify whether the gutters are too full and need to be changed or whatnot. And the reasoning behind that is in the world of my heat goes out, we get a call immediately, right? No questions asked. You get a call. In the world of I have a very small leak underneath the secondary sink. And what happens is a year later, after that's been leaking for a year, we all know I'm gonna have to you replace now you're replacing the cabinet, you got mold, you have all the things that happen when small leaks like that happen. Could have been $100 to fix today, but are 3 grand down the line. And so what we're doing is activating our residents to be our eyes on the ground. And the results have been just tremendous. Oh, I guess I should go back. At the end of that 90 days, if they do all three things, we drop another $150 into their investment account to help them build wealth while they live there because they did those three things and that helped us out. We didn't have to get maintenance out. So just for living with us, paying rent on time, and doing the 4 videos a year, you're going to be able to stack $600 extra without the fund growth or anything like that. on top of that savings account. And what we're noticing as operators, it's making us extremely efficient. Our renewal rates are insane because people are building wealth with us. They're not leaving our buildings. Our turnover costs today are about 50% of what they were when I wasn't running this program. And what we're seeing on the operational side is when we deliver these opportunities and have engaged partners in the building who are residents, we're succeeding on a higher level than we were.
That's really interesting, especially the piece of you incentivizing the residents to do those minimal tasks. The number you came up with on that, the $150 that you provide, that you give them, is where did you come up with that calculation? Is that on average of what it would have cost you anyway to send somebody boots on the ground to get that type of work done?
That's right. So it's looking at it as like, all right, if I was to roll a truck out there, how much time does that cost my people in hours? How hard is it to coordinate with a resident, right? Nobody wants you in their building once a quarter. And that's really when you should how many times you probably should want to get eyes on it. A lot of people go with annual check-ins, but annual is a long period of time. A lot can happen in 12 months. So for us, it's just like how long does it take? How much does it cost us to make that happen? And then what was the number, and we went through iterations on values and how we came to this, but what's the number that makes it feel tangible for the resident in an impactful way that says, hey, that's a no brainer. I'm going to do it. I'm going to help with these projects. And the beautiful thing is by rewarding them in that kind of capacity, we have an over 83% renewal rate right now. And I think industry average in Atlanta is like close to 60. We're feeling pretty good about people staying with us because they're part of this program.
Yeah, so and then they're gonna be seeing a direct relation, like that deposit is actually growing. Are you giving them, like, a regular statement then to show them what's going on with that
Yep.
deposit or investment?
Yeah, absolutely. So they have access to our full investing portal. If you go to investwithroots.com, and anybody across the country can invest with us. And if you go into there, you're going to see your investment portal very similar to how the resident sees it. The only component that the resident has that most investors don't is the ability to do their videos, the ability to see their rebates on a more actionable basis. But other than that, the portal's the exact same. We want to provide a pathway to upward mobility and being able to take that next step in life. And after 3 years of running this program, we're actually starting to see some of our first residents move out and buy their first homes, which is really unique for us. That's where we're aiming. We want to be a mezzanine product between renting and owning that helps you get prepared and step into that home ownership phase of life.
I gotta back up here for just a second. There has to have been something that kinda spurred this idea in you, Daniel, and there's gotta be a level of motivation associated with this program. Where did this all start?
I started investing in real estate. I lucked into real estate in 2009. Fantastic timing, obviously, to get into this industry and fell in love with the asset and did it on the side as like a hobby. Basically, me and my wife, we would go and try and buy as many. Like that was like how we saw our retirement happening. Is like we're gonna work our butts off in our day to day job, and then we're gonna buy investment properties and we're gonna rent them and maybe flip them, do whatever. But that hobby, after 7 years, 2009 to 2017, that hobby turned into a full time career because it really started to outpace our other earnings at our other job. And basically did a ton in this industry in terms of syndication, done a ton of retail sales. I've done almost everything I can think of in the real estate space. And in 2020, when COVID hit, I think like everybody, you just have a moment to breathe, and a lot of negative came out of COVID. And I think this is one of the, for me at least, it's a huge positive that did. And that was like, I got a moment to look at the data and look at what made our real estate deals successful. And time again, the thing that made them successful were the people in the buildings, not necessarily the location, right? The location is what it is. You have to pick good locations, right? But those go in and out of those, move with the market, whether they're empty or full. And with people who live in your buildings, if they're taking care of it and they deliver you a unit back that's in relatively good shape and they've paid rent on time, your numbers should pencil out, right? And at the end of the day, when I was looking at the data, you end up in a world where you can predict, like I said, the roof's going out. You can predict the water heaters going out based on age. You cannot predict when someone's going to have a small leak and not tell you about it. You can't. And those are the things that were you looked at the end of the day and you go, wow, this deal was great. Except now they moved out and I had a $6,000 turn. And that is what we aim to strive to figure out how to be more operationally efficient. We realize that, hey, the person who's like kind of the forgotten equation here is the resident. And we need a way to help them build wealth and kind of cross that chasm between renting and owning anyway. Why not do this together? Why not a structure together that benefits both parties?
Sure. But you've brought up the regular inspections as an example associated with what you've been pushing to the residents and then incentivizing them accordingly. What other efficiencies have you found using this model?
Yeah, occupancy is extremely high. Anytime we need air filters, those requests get done at such a quicker pace. Our ability to have these residents just communicating faster with our teams and like being able to really have people on the other side of the phone that want to have you succeed and aren't that I'm not gonna say that that residents in other worlds are like kind of part of the problem or anything like that, but it's a very tough relationship when you go into something and the resident thinks that the landlord's gonna screw them, and the landlord thinks that the resident's gonna screw them from day one, and that's adversarial, right? Nobody in any other industry goes into a relationship with their customer and says, "Oh, I don't know about this." Like most of the time,
Mhm.
it's customers always right. Let's make sure we get them to a place that's really happy. And I feel like for some reason, because of the nature of real estate, we don't always have that excited to live there. They're moving in almost adversarial from day one, and we just find that aligning those interests has worked really well for us.
That's a really good point. One of those things that I've always seemed to run into is that when you're dealing with property managers, your interests aren't aligned. But I guess I never thought of a situation where you're absolutely right. You are starting off in an adversarial stance with your residents. You're like, who's going to screw over who first is that mindset. Talking about the property management, are you solely doing the property management? Do you have boots on the ground or you rely on a property manager for any of your properties?
Almost all of them. So we use third party property management. When we spoke last year, we were all in-house managed. We've had a great growth year for us. I think last year when we spoke, we probably had somewhere in the range of 100 doors. We have almost 300 doors today. And we've got 7,000 plus investors across the country now versus probably 800 when we spoke first. One of those stepping stones to being able to scale at the rate we want to was finding a property managing relationship who can scale with us. And we think we found that in a company called Marketplace Homes. So if anybody's looking for a great manager, I'll plug them. They are amazing to work with.
So, just to remind everybody, we are talking to Daniel Dorfman, and you could learn what his team is up to by going to investwithroots.com. That's going to be clickable link in the show notes. Daniel, I'm curious now. You're talking about you have this third party property manager. It sounds like you have removed a large chunk or a portion of what is required of your property manager. Is your relationship with them different because of it?
It is a little bit different, but we had to, and it took us a minute to find that partner who was aligned in giving this resident this like kind of wealth building opportunity. We take some aspects of their life, I think, easier with this program, but we also hold them at a higher standard probably than anybody else in terms of when we do have issues, we need to get them done because we can help build as much wealth as we possibly want for an individual. If they're waiting for a week for a repair reply, we've all failed. And as much as our program helps to alleviate some of the challenges and make it easier for them to check the house and do repairs and do all the things that we do, especially on the renewal. If you think about this program is renewing at a much significantly higher rate, That's a great thing for them. That's an amazing number for our property managers to hold on to. And I think, again, there's benefits for sure to the resident, but we do have a very high standard of reply and what we would like our service to be. So
Sure. You talked about your platform or the dashboard that everybody logs into. Is that something that was self-created, or is that something you're licensing from a different party?
we built everything in house. We had very specific wants and needs, and we have a very specific vision of where we want the platform to evolve to. And we looked at a lot of the third party opportunities out there and just didn't quite find everything that met the need. Now, it did require us to go a little slower, right? Because we had to build it. But now that it's built, now it's running, we're really excited about the outcome.
So growing from 100 doors to 300, you've already talked about how you had to make changes when it came to your property management. With that type of growth, what other changes did you have to make?
It's really about, like, team, right? So our team is scaled. We've got 26 people who work with us now on the team every day, full time. We've increased our kind of footprint in terms of servicing our investors and making sure that they're like feeling the love, and we've increased our content output to those individuals. Like I said, I think we've got a little bit over 7,000 investors that have joined the community now. And we've raised a little bit over 40 million. And I think we were probably at close to 11 when we spoke last time. And I think a lot of the growth that and we forecasted this growth, wanted this growth, and want to do it again next year. And a lot of that is due to us having our own platform and having really skilled engineers who can help us scale at the volume that we want to scale at. And yeah, lots of mostly infrastructure and redesigning and making sure that we've got the team in place to be able to handle what's coming in.
So, with that, growth is always one of the goals, but what is your long-term goal with Roots?
Our goal is to have an evergreen community where anybody across the United States can participate in real estate and get their feet wet, understand the fundamentals, get in at an entry point that makes sense and that feels comfortable to them. We do a lot around why we bought in that area, what we're buying, what is leverage due to a fund, right? Because I think a lot of early stage investors or people that haven't actually dealt with real estate don't understand that one of the primary levers to success is that leverage and the ability to almost have these synthetic transactions along the way as you're holding. And it's been an interesting 2 years for that too, right? It's trying to educate as much as we can, deliver some of the learnings that we've learned across the way, help people get investing with us to investing in their first place. And if we can do that, we feel like we've been pretty successful.
So, over the past 3 years, I'm sure you've learned a ton of lessons along the way. What was the biggest lesson you've learned that caused you to pivot?
The biggest lesson is really, I think, for us in the way that we deliver our messaging to residents. We're going to deliver this message and they're going to be gung ho about it. Not really, right? Like when you have residents who you're working with primarily who have no trust in the landlords that they've worked with before, and you're telling them they're going to earn interest and do these things, it was tough, right? Because we were trying to go at it at a sense of like, why wouldn't you want to invest with us? Why wouldn't you want to do this? And I worked 60 hours a week, two jobs, and I don't have time to even think about what the programming you're talking about. Like, you need to earn my trust. And so,
Mhm.
what we've learned to do over the time is really craft that story to make sure that we're meeting our residents where they are and not trying to just like say, hey, we're going to come in here with our product and it's better. We need to be able to provide for them and to provide an environment where we get to prove ourselves every time that quarter goes in and every time that 90 days goes and we deposit one, right? That is proof. So that's how we start to build trust. And until you start to build trust, you really don't have a relationship. I think my biggest lesson, and I think it's a relearn over the years, is you got to meet your customer where they are. And you have to really take a walk in their shoes before you can ask them for anything.
Sure. I would imagine that this is a kind of maybe at least at first a difficult story to tell investors as well because this is unique. What kind of changes did you make there in order to pitch this properly?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough that I had done enough deals before this that I had a pretty good track record with about 130 investors who I had worked with, and they would come in on deals before. And so what we were able to do is just flat out say, "Hey, I believe fundamentally that renters should be able to build wealth. And I believe that this gap between renting and owning is becoming just harder and harder. And if we don't try at least to do something to help that, we're not helping. We're not making the impact that we can." And so what basically we went out to them and said is, "Hey, if I have this crazy idea, we're going to give residents or try to get them equity and try and get them as partners. If I delivered you 10% next year and 3% of instead of 13 and 3% went to the resident, would you be okay with that?" That's basically how we started the initial conversations. And some people were like, "No, I want my 13." But others were like, "You know what? Yeah, I I don't see, I'll try it with you," basically. And that was years of developing list and trust that we had developed with these investors. But at the end of the day, what happened was the opposite, right? I actually made more money in this deal than we did before. And it was because of the efficiencies of them staying longer and then helping out around the place. And it ended up being a great story. But you're right. The first conversation was more around this idea of impact investing and less around the return that I was usually focused on.
Yeah, that is interesting. Like you said, it'd be an interesting conversation to have because as you're doing your best to align the landlord or investor's interests with the renters, you're trying to do your best to remove that adversarial behavior on both sides of that equation there. And I suppose now that you have been doing this for a while, you're getting more and more clarity and numbers, and you're able to dial things in at a better level so things become more consistent.
Yes, absolutely better each day. And the big ups and downs and swings and stuff, those are amazing. But we really pride ourselves on, hey, if we just get 5% better a month or whatever that number is each day, if we focus on doing the things that get us a little bit better, we're going to be a better company a year from now and a better company a year from then. And scale helps, right? Like that's without a doubt, right? The ability to walk into partners now and people and be able to go into property management and actually have some sort of sway. It's not a ton. We're not a massive operator, but at least it's when we were walking in with 20 doors and our hats out, that's a little, no one's making any moves for you. It's starting to at least now come to a place where, hey, the requests are a little bit more mutual.
Yeah. No, and that makes a lot of sense. I've talked time and time again, especially sales training, is the concept that when you're acting out of desperation, there isn't going to be a deal to be had. That's not a good position to be in, no matter what side you're on.
Yeah, it's same as negotiating any of these properties, right? Like you can't go if you go in there in desperation or needing to buy, it's not going to put you in a good spot.
Just to remind everybody one more time, we are talking to Daniel Dorfman. You can learn more at investwithroots.com. Investwithroots.com. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. Before we jump into the rapid fire questions, Daniel, is there a question or concept you wished we would have covered here so far today?
No, I think you did a fantastic job as always, and we're just appreciative to be on the show and to have any kind of the audience. And for those listening who are in real estate and like thinking about their next move, incentivize your residents. You will not regret it. Getting them engaged as one operator to another been just an absolute joy and privilege. And coming from a world where we don't, again, you're not as friendly and you don't have the same customer service marks. It's just made a world of difference on our staff too. It's awesome. So figure out ways
If
to engage
somebody
the rest.
if somebody wanted to do that, do you have any resources available to help them get started with even the concept?
We do absolutely. We actually, I guess this is a little bit early, but we've actually packaged our software and our resident engagement solution in a way that can provide to any operator now. Anybody who's interested in that kind of programming or in just even feedback or anything like that, I'm here. I'm very open to talking through any of these elements. And I think if everybody was out there trying to help their renters get a little better or have a little more than when they came, we'd be in a better spot.
So where would they find that information on your site, or do they have to reach out to you directly?
Yeah, you could actually you could go to engage with Bloom. Our software is called Bloom on the operating side.com.
Is that BLOOM?
Yep.
Okay. Sounds good. I appreciate that information. If you're ready, Daniel, we'll jump into the rapid fires.
All right. Fire away.
What lie do real estate investors tell themselves and sometimes to others?
It's gonna pencil out. No, I'm just kidding. I think that the big one that you find yourself in now, I think, is trying to understand where these property taxes and insurance costs are coming from. Like you're that's probably I think every operator's nightmare right now are these the biggest lie is I have control over these non-controllable costs
Right.
that are weighing the business down.
And that's one of those things that we talked briefly about, the adversarial situation with landlords and renters. Your process helps with that communication because there's when you have to increase rents, it that's probably coming from a better standpoint than like where I'm at today, where I'm just increasing rents to try to keep in front of all of this, let alone what the renters actually think is going on. Just greedy landlord.
It is exactly, and I don't think what our program gives us the ability to do is treat them like an investors and just say, look, this was your tax bill last year. This is it this year. For the first time, I think in a lot of markets, it might actually be a better decision to rent at this point based on the hidden cost of what these homes are costing to own. And it's an interesting point that we're at right now. I've not seen increases like this in my career.
And then you have, unfortunately, some states stepping in, limiting the rent increases and a few other things that kind of prohibit some of these properties from penciling out.
Rent increases, but have no problem increasing every other cost.
Exactly. Do you have a book recommendation or what are you reading right now?
I can give you both. One of my favorite books of all time, not necessarily a real estate book. It's called Tool of Titans. It's by Tim Ferriss.
Tim
Uh,
Ferriss. Yep.
Collection of short stories. Really a great read and a fun read. And then what I'm reading now is a book called Hooked, which is how to build habit forming products.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Slow down a little bit. I think take a little bit deeper breath and understanding that it takes a while to realize that the person you're speaking to and the things that you want so passionately aren't necessarily the things that person that said they're going to maybe get back to you or like they're not intentionally slighting you by not getting back to you the second that you wanted them to. I think realizing that there's a bigger picture of everybody's lives and things happen as they come.
What single strategy, process, or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time saving impact to you and your business?
Not to pat our own backs, but I think the Bloom software that we've done with the resident engagement piece is really it's phenomenally changed the way we operate in all sorts of different ways. So yeah,
One last time, investwithroots.com. This was a great conversation, Daniel, really eye opening. And I hope that we can talk sooner next time.
me
I
too.
think we could spend a whole episode just on mindset.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's been a challenge and it's been one that we've tried to do with a smile on our faces the whole time. But we love it. And thank you so much for having us on. I appreciate it.